Welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. My name is Rob Maxwell. I'm an exercise physiologist and personal trainer, and I own Maxwell's Fitness Programs. I've been in business for the past 25 years. All right, let's get on with the topic of the day. It's all about brain training. Brain training. What the mind does. What the mind does to the body. Body does to the mind. As many of you may know or not know, my first degree is in psychology, so really love studying human behavior and how the brain works and how it works us. So there's a lot of that in my training. There's a lot of that in my belief systems. There's a lot of that in my coaching. So, I would honestly say I use psychology as much as physiology with people I train and training myself, and it just cannot be stressed how important it is. So with that, let's talk about the old brain. All right, so some of the latest research on human performance is all centered around the brain. They know now that the physical limitations of the body have so much more depth to them than we realize, than we have any clue. And that fatigue, so physical fatigue, comes from the brain, not the body. They know that, there's no doubt about it. So in other words, the body can do so much more than it thinks, than we think, but it is limited by the fact that we don't think we can. So, and this research is factual. It's just been documented. There's been plenty of physiologists out there in all different realms, whether it be sport, whether it be in health, whether it be in whatever, that are talking about the true limitations, the true limits to our physical abilities is in the mind. We've created way too many ceilings, way too many impossibilities. And, we can look at it at the greater scale, the greatest scale, as far as the greatest elites. And more importantly, we can look at it in our own training and find out, how do we start to switch this? All right. So let's just go back decades. Let's go back very early before we really started researching this, and get a little bit into what are the true physiological effects of fatigue, what is that, and then I'll talk about how those are all influenced by our brain. All right, but first let's go back to Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister was the first man to ever break the 4-minute mile, and he was obviously an elite runner. And, he was really close. He was really close for many years, 401, 402, he was right there. And for some reason, he just believed, and I cannot remember the exact year now. Maybe somebody who listens to this can text me afterwards and let me know, but I'm thinking 50s, 60s, definitely in that era, possibly late 1940s. Even earlier. Now I should have known this, but I didn't actually know I was going to throw Bannister into this. But he goes way back, okay? And at one point, the 4-minute mile was considered to be a physical impossibility, cannot be done. Well, he broke it, and he broke it, 3:59 blank, and a little bit despair, right? So the amazing thing that happened was within 1 year of the time that he broke the 4-minute mile, 40 other runners did too. Let that sink in. After 1 year, so within 1 year, the next year rolled around, and by that anniversary of it, 40 runners had already broken the 4-minute mile as well. So that has always intrigued scientists as to, why that's true. And, it's pretty obvious. Did we all of a sudden learn how to train for the mile? No, of course not, these were all elite runners running what they thought were their best times. What they learned was it was now possible. So if old Bannister can do it, he wasn't old. He was elite, but good old Bannister can do it. Old Roger can do it. If he, the world's best, but if he can do it, then it can be done. And if it can be done, why not me? And obviously 40 people thought that way, and then 40 people did it. So that's one of the first breakthroughs that way. And then since then, there's been others. I recently listened to a podcast, and Ryan Hall, the famous marathoner, one of the, I guess he's considered to be the best American marathoner of all time. He was saying, that the new impossibility, although now they know it's not, but like what replaced the 4-minute mile was the 2-hour marathon. That became like, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And now people like him, who's not only, he's a retired legend, in the marathon, his wife is now training and I believe made Olympic trials for America, and she's a fantastic runner, one of the top female marathon runners in the world. So he's still really on top of his game and coaching and research and all these other things. Well, he said, no, we know it's going to happen now. Like, it's the new impossibility that now, it's going to be broken. It's just really a matter of when. And like the metrics are starting to show that it's going in that direction. In other words, they know based on the half marathon times where they need to be to get to the marathon times, and they're getting really close on the half marathon times. And Nike and some other group did it in a trial that wasn't an official race, so that's building, I guess you would call it hope even more, but at the same time, they're not going to count that because, like Bannister going under the 4-minute mile, it's got to be, it can't be like these orchestrated conditions. It's got to be, legitimate. And so it has happened in their little test pilot thing, but it's going to happen in a marathon, a regular marathon where somebody is going to go under 2 hours. So, how's this going to happen? It's going to happen from somebody being able to do it, and obviously has the physiological ability to, and then this strong mind of knowing that it's possible and all that. But I don't, I'm not going to, I've spent too much time on talking about how this works in running, just as examples, but the fact remains that all of the research now on human performance is about the brain and how they know the brain dictates literally everything that happens. So let's talk about why. So the brain is the control center. The brain is trying to keep you alive. Everybody has to remember that, biologically speaking, like that is what the brain is there to do. It's there to it's your major computer looking at every potential threat, whether it be a visual threat, something you see, something you hear, something you feel. It's making the physiological changes in your body so you survive. The whole deal is survival, right? We forget that, but it's moment to moment survival of any living species on this planet Earth. Like, it's survival. So that's what the brain's job is to do. The brain is the organ that's actually perceiving the threats, potentially feeling the threats, potentially seeing the threats, potentially hearing the threats. Okay, that's the brain's job. All right, the heart pumps blood to the muscles. Right, the liver is a purifier. Right, the gallbladder helps us absorb and digest fat. Everything's got its job in our body. The brain's job is the major computer, the major analyzer, to see what are the perceived threats or see what are the actual threats. All right. So there are true, real threats out there. There's true, real threats. So, whether they be like, again, I'm keeping this to the training circle, whatever the training might be, whether it be running or cycling or lifting or whatever. There's true threats, right? One of the biggest ones is going to be heat exhaustion, dehydration. So the brain's trying to pick up on those signals. And that appears to be where most of the fatigue starts to come in. And before I really tackle that, because I want to talk about practical steps to improve you, help you improve, okay, or improve you. Hey, sounds good. Before we got into brain training in physiology, we're literally if you're talking in the endurance world, we're studying things like VO2 max. That's the maximum volume of oxygen your body can produce or utilize in a given minute. So that's what your VO2 max is. The higher VO2 max is, the more oxygen is pumped to your muscles, the faster you're going to go. So that's your VO2 max. And, they studied that out what. So they know, okay, so if you're a lighter vessel, so, the human body is a lighter vessel, simply meaning you're lighter of weight, and you have major cardiac output, so that means the left ventricle of your heart has hypertrophy to the point where it's stronger and can pump more blood per beat, all right, which is stroke volume, then you're going to be able to go faster. And then all that wraps up into your VO2 max. So the higher your VO2 max, the faster you're going to go. Another area of exercise physiology where we studied the physiology was muscle fiber type. So if you have more slow twitch muscle fibers, then you're going to be able to have more endurance. If you have more fast twitch muscle fibers, you're going to have greater speed, greater strength. So that's another area we dove into, and that was really important both in the endurance world and both in the strength world. Both were, muscle fiber type was very, very critical. Then we looked at the energy systems. So our body cannot run without ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate is the source in the muscles that propels us forward. We can't just use carbs. The carbs have to be broken down through a process that produces more ATP, and the ATP is what is used for the muscles for energy, for movement, for anything. All right, so we studied that out, the yin yang, and there's 3 different ways that more ATP is produced. All right, so that's a huge thing in exercise physiology. So, then we looked at, I'll just wrap it up with what the studies have been prior to the brain training. So getting back to muscle fiber type, then it came back into recruitment versus hypertrophy, meaning what is more important, how many muscle fibers we recruit or the amount of exhaustion or use of a single muscle fiber. So what became more important to make somebody strong? And then everything, they determined it was a combination of both. So your strongest, best athletes have the largest muscles, and they recruit those muscles faster, which comes through the speed of your training and the load of your training. So all these things were looked at to determine, well, how do we make these athletes bigger, stronger, faster? We had to look at the cell level, at the muscle level, and see what was going on. I said that would be the last one, but I forgot one major thing that we have studied in exercise physiology, and that's periodization. So periodization means that we're actually changing the script around, that we're literally building a cycle of training for the entire year, and that was done. It started out really with the East Germans in the Olympics, and then we kind of got a hold of it and started using it. And it's a very technical approach to training where you have a macro cycle, which is the whole year, a mesocycle, which is 1 or 2 months, and then the microcycle, which is weeks, and everything gets planned down to the dime. It's got its pros and cons, and that's not the point, but the point is we really studied that. So everybody in the physiology world, not only in fitness and health and performance, but how do we make the human body better? So we looked at all these things: VO2 max, muscle fiber types, cardiorespiratory issues with circulation and periodization, all these recruiting, hypertrophy versus hyperplasia, all these great things. And then finally, people started to get smart and go, well, wait a minute, what's the control center? It's the brain. The brain is the control center. So let's look at that. So they started finding out that the thing that basically freaks the brain out the most is heat. So when we start to really get warm, all right, your brain starts sending signals to the body that it's in distress, that, that there's problems. So, that's where they started looking at a lot of the research with physical training is, the brain basically sensing heat, all right? And that's not the big part of this. I'm just saying that that's where they really started looking at it. And then they went into, so what are the other physiological stressors that the brain is going to perceive as stress? Because if you know anything about anxiety or anything negative, anything distressful to you, then it's not necessarily the threat, it's the perceived threat. In other words, you might be very anxious about how a conversation is going to go, but you have no idea how the conversation is going to go. So it's really the perceived threat that you are all anxious about. So, the brain, we like to call the lizard brain, we like to call it the lizard brain because this portion of it is picking up on signals from the body, all right? Heat's one thing, but it's picking up on lactic acid buildup in your muscles. Because is that a threat? Yeah, lactic acid is a toxin, right? It's an acid. So if you've ever done a big set of leg extensions where your muscles are burning, so you know how it feels acutely, well, guess what? That's acutely, meaning when you're running or cycling, there's lactic acid buildup just to not that level. It's just at a lower level because it is the byproduct of anaerobic metabolism. So lactic acid is the byproduct of anaerobic metabolism. So if you're starting to go anaerobic, which means a little bit faster, you're pushing your pace, whether it be swimming, biking, or running, then you're producing lactic acid. It may not be to the acute stage that you feel it while doing a set of leg extensions on your legs or bicep curls doing your arms, but it's still accumulating. So guess what? It's accumulating in the bloodstream. The brain's getting the message, uh-oh, I'm in danger, right? Because remember, the brain's job is to keep you alive, so it doesn't know you're exercising, right? It doesn't know. It's lizard brain. It's just control center. It just knows, there's different parts of your brain. The lizard brain is the brain that controls threats. So it just knows that there is now a toxin in the body, a threat. So if speeding up is what caused the greater amount of lactic acid and then that signal to get to your brain, then what do you think the brain is going to do if not reprogrammed? Right? Slow down. Slow down. Slow down. Gotta slow down. Gotta stop. It's going to stop. So it's going to start sending its own signals to slow down. All right? Let's look at another one. When you start to hyperventilate, you're changing the relationship between O2 in and carbon dioxide out. All right, so that flow is always there. It's always there. But when you hyperventilate, it starts to change it a little bit, right? So your body then, your brain is now like not really able to differentiate. Well, they're hyperventilating because they're running really hard or they're a little anxious or whatever, but this is going to balance out. Brain doesn't know that. Brain knows you're starting to hyperventilate. Now all of a sudden the O2 and CO2 relationship is shifting a little bit, and in the brain's mind, no pun intended, it's shifting in the direction of danger. So what is it going to do? Well, it wants to control your breathing. How does it control your breathing? Get you to slow down. Right? It's picking up on all these different physiological cues. And, of course, you're probably already getting what the answer is. We got to jump in there. We got to mediate. And I can go on and on about what the body does as we start to reach peak performance. The body is going to be in some form of distress. I mean, there's no way to be at our physical peak and not be in a form of physiological distress, but is it going to kill you? And, as we know when we train and we race and all that, the answer is typically no, right? So, that's on the physiological side. Now, let's look at some of the other side of things, of positive versus negative thinking. The famous quote that I've always said, if you think you can, if you think you can't, you're both right. I mean, they know that now. And we have this massive ceiling that we bring in to everything. Call it baggage, call it what you want. But, not just the brain training on the physiological responses and how to handle it, but also how we think going in. I mean, there has been study after study after study that has shown that if you pretty much think negatively, most likely that outcome is going to be negative. If you pretty much say things like, I can't do this, this is going to hurt, and I'll get into that in a second, but this is going to hurt and I can't handle it, well, you're right. If you go into it and you keep all your vibrations high, you keep all of your energy high, then most likely you're going to have a positive outcome. All right. So what do we do about all this? So, number one, know that the ceiling we're setting, physiologically speaking, is self-imposed. Just know that we don't know what we're capable of, but I guarantee you we're capable of more. I mean, the feats people have been able to accomplish are amazing. And we all have different physiological gifts, no doubt about it. But when we don't hit a certain goal, and of course I'm talking, this is my job, it's physiological, it's coaching. When we don't hit a certain goal, I was going to say plateau, but we don't necessarily want to hit a plateau. That's most likely due to the fact that we sold ourselves short. We don't realize how much ability we have. There has been so many cases of people that have overcome different barriers besides the Roger Bannisters of the world. I mean, we're talking, amazing human accomplishments and feats that have been accomplished. And there is no doubt in my mind, none of them have ever been accomplished from negative thinking. There's negative thinkers. There's no way. Person went into it saying, I got this, I can do this, and it sounds hokey but it's not. It's not. And again, I've got my psych degree. I worked in psychology, so I would tackle the end of that if I was coaching somebody like that and say, we also know why the person does that, because that's called a fear of failure. And a fear of failure means that if you put those, negative vibes out there, then you're not going to be disappointed. If you put it out there early, well, I don't think I can do this, and then you come up with some excuses as to why, then you go and do it and you fail, and then you don't feel disappointed. So that's like this fear of failure. You're putting too much on the line. You're putting your self-esteem on the line instead of just putting the action on the line. You're putting your whole self on the line when you start to do that. When somebody suffers from a fear of failure, they don't see the event as the event, they see it as themselves. So in other words, you set a goal, got a guy now, he's a master's runner, and he really wants to get into the 21s and the 5K. It's a 7-minute mile essentially. So, and I know he can do it, and pretty much I believe he knows he can do it. But let's say he didn't have the self-esteem, and he's been tackling around 22-minute 5Ks, which are good. So he's right there. But what if he didn't have the self-esteem and he had this fear of failure? He would always say, so I missed my goal, so I'm a loser, right? That's negative. And of course, people that think that way need to get some help. I mean, that's not a healthy way to think. But a lot of times that's why that negativity is there with somebody, because they do have that fear of failure. And there is absolutely no way you're going to tackle any major physiological, or I would argue any goal, without risking failure. I mean, failure just means that you didn't hit what you wanted to hit at the time, and you got to risk it. If you're never risking failure, your goals aren't high enough. So, Roger Bannister, I'd have to look it up. I don't know, but I guarantee he ran over 4-minute miles hundreds of times, if not thousands of times, before he finally broke the 4-minute mile, he wasn't afraid to fail, because if Roger failed, he's not a failure. The goal that day failed. Let's go back to work. So a lot of times the negative attitude goes in because there is that fear of failure. You have to be willing to say, I don't care. People that play tennis and they play it really, really safe, and it like drives me nuts playing with people like that. They dink and dunk you so they don't lose. Like they're playing not to lose instead of playing to win. Well, if I try to hit the ball down the line, chances are I'm going to hit it out of the line. It's going to be out. And they think that way, so they don't ever try. Instead, they do with their very safe hits back and forth. That's great. You might win your match, but you're not getting better. You don't want to get better because you don't want to risk it. So, anytime we're going to succeed, we've got to push our boundaries. And we have to know that we are the number one limiting factor as to why we don't. It's us, like when I coached some more elite runners years ago and some triathletes, they used to say that, as I got close to the goal in the race, I was like, if Rob thinks I can do it, then I can do it. He wouldn't lie to me, And they were right. So like they put more faith in my faith in them than they had in themselves until they had enough faith in themselves. Like until they did it. Like, oh wow, I can break 18 minutes in a 5K. Oh, I can. And to be honest, was I sure when I told the athlete they can go under 18 or whatever the goal was? No. How can I be sure? How do I know? I know they're close. Did I know they can? Yes. Did I know they would? No. What am I going to tell them? You can. Of course. Because they can. You don't know if they're going to, but they can. And with a lot of people, it's knowing they can. Getting that faith up, knowing they can, is going to push them to try. So 2 things I encourage everybody to do. 2 things. First, let's go with the in the moment performance. Whether you are in a bike race, riding your bike hard on a training day, running a 5K, swimming an event, lifting weights, whatever. Get your mind right first. Like, embrace the suck. Lance Armstrong used to say that he would win his, obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious or not, but, he won 7 Tour de France's, right? So, like, for him, that was the event. And he would say he would win those because he was able to suffer more than his competitors. And let's not get into the whole doping thing. Yes, he did. And you know what? Every other guy out there with him did too. So that's not why he won. And I don't mean to be controversial here, but every one of them did it. So the point is that, yes, he did it. And also he was more able to handle suffering than his fellow competitors. He said that. And if you ever read some of his books or whatever, you'll see why. He grew up an abused kid, and he was like, you know what, this is nothing like that as a kid in Plano, Texas. Nothing like that. So like he was able to take that and use it as a motivator. The point was, he didn't fear suffering and burn and fatigue and dizziness. Like he didn't fear that stuff. Instead, he said he embraced it. He would push it higher because if he knew he was suffering, then so were his competitors. Sounds a little masochistic, I get it. That's what you get when you win 7 tours. It doesn't come easy. But embrace the suck. In other words, whatever you're doing, yeah, this is going to hurt. Like my muscles are going to burn. My lungs are going to burn. I might feel a little spacey and dingy. Like, if you're in oxygen deprivation a little bit, you might feel a little dizzy. In other words, tell yourself, brain, I'm okay. I'm okay. Like, I'm good. I'm really good. Like, this isn't pleasant because making yourself better isn't supposed to be pleasant at the moment. Just like doing well in school, it's not pleasant to study. Well, pushing your body to higher levels, isn't meant to be pleasant. You tell your brain going in, brain, me, self, I'm okay. Thank you for looking out for me, but I'm okay. I know I'm going to get a little hot. I'm okay. Because as soon as I'm done, I'm going to cool off. Hey, you're going to anticipate the lactic acid long before I feel it, brain. I'm good. So it sounds hokey, but you got to do it. So that's like what I advise for going into any training or any race or whatever or event that you're going to do. If it's lifting weights, bodybuilding, making yourself stronger, you say, hey, I can lift this. I can lift this. I've got a spotter. I'm good. I'm strong enough. It might burn. Maybe you're going for more push-ups or pull-ups than you're ever going to do. You say, I got this. You got to say that, We joke around all the time at the gym, but it's really not a joke, It's like, don't say the C word, and somebody might look at you like, dude, that's a really bad word. I'm like, yeah, not the one you think. I'm talking about can't. Don't say can't. Won't, but not can't. Because that's usually what it comes down to, is won't. Doing, for me, my current level of pull-ups has been around 12 or 13 for a while. That's hard. I mean, it sucks. For anybody knocks out pull-ups for reps, one of my clients, Zach, he's a monster. He can do 30, It's hard. It's, it's going to burn, because you're pulling your whole weight, your heart rate gets up. So when you're doing maximum amount of pull-ups, you're using muscular strength, you're using muscular endurance, and you're using cardiorespiratory endurance because your heart rate is pumping more blood to the muscles. So it's not like curls where your heart rate's not going to get up. Things like squats and pull-ups, your heart rate's going to get up. So it hurts. Somewhere around 6, you're I could stop here. This is good, right? If you're going to double that, it's going to take some work, So for me, can I do 12 pull-ups? Yeah. Am I going to every time I train? I hope so. But guess what? If I don't, it's because I won't, not I can't. It's because I got somewhere around 9 and I decided the burn hurt and it just sucked that day and I didn't feel like doing it. So don't say can't. It's not true. You won't. It's that simple. Get honest with your trainer. I won't do it. Okay. Wasting your money, but okay. But can't. Any good trainer is not going to suggest anything to do that you can't do. And it's just, they're not going to. So adjust that training. And then the second thing to do is just overall, start to develop a positive attitude. Start to believe in yourself. And I'm talking in between training sessions, start to realize that you have more control over how you do than you believe. Matter of fact, you have all the control in the world, and the only thing you're limiting with negative thinking is yourself. And, I'm working on the piano right now, and it's fun for me, and I'm a beginner, and I work with a friend of mine / colleague, really, because she's a trainer too, and her name's Natalie, and she's awesome. And, we just had a piano session today, and she literally we talked a little bit about training before we get going on the piano, because she's a really good endurance athlete. And she was talking about how, every time she trains, even when it's miserable, she smiles because it changes the energy. Puts an energy out there to the universe. And, let's say you smile at somebody on the road, they're going to probably smile back, and it's going to bring you energy. And I absolutely believe that. And knowing her like I do, it's always been one of the things I've loved about her, because she does smile. We did a relay race years ago, and it was across Florida, and she was my teammate, and I didn't know her at all then. But the thing I picked up on right away was she smiled and she joked and she laughed. And, and so there's times in her mind, this is going to suck. She was doing a 4-hour ride on the trainer, and she's like, this is going to suck. Everybody thinks that people that do stuff like that love it. It's so not true. Nobody loves sitting on a bike trainer for 4 hours. I'm sorry. Nobody loves it. But it's necessary for her training and her goals of doing a half marathon. So she can sit there on the trainer for 4 hours and bitch and moan and complain, or she can put a smile on her face. And I know her. She chooses to smile. Now, for me, that's hard, believe it or not. I can tell myself all the good positive things, but I can be guilty of, once the pain starts to come, get grumpy, in a 5K or something. It's when I remember that, when I remember, look, dude, you're out here by choice, make the best of it, and I start smiling at people around and joking, my energy level just picks up huge. When I'm not like that, I have a bad day. I just don't have a good race. So like for me, I can be very, very positive, and I think ultimately I am very positive, but I know that like my go-to with discomfort is anger, and anger, grumpiness is a form of anger. So like that's where I'll go with it, and that's where I limit myself. So, I'm not perfect here, I'm preaching to myself as well. But I know absolutely everything I'm saying is true. So brain training is key. This came up with a client / friend, who was talking about brain training and ceilings and limits, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna talk about that today. So that's where we're at, and I want to thank our sponsors, Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of Gilden Group Realty Pros. They're awesome. We cannot put on this podcast without sponsorship. It's not free. And somebody's got to pay for it, and they're helping to pay for it because they want to spread the word of fitness. And they do great at their job. Like I've said, they are great at their job. Proper English. They're great at their job, as I've said before, but pretend you haven't. The market is hot and houses are selling themselves, but you need agents to help you find what you're looking for, because chances are you're going somewhere if you're selling. And that's where having great agents comes in, and building relationships. And they're hustlers, they're fit. So please give them a chance. Please give them a chance. Jonathan and Lynn Gilden of Gilden Group Realty, and they can be reached at thegildengroup.com. Until next time, be max fit and be max well.